Hello, music fans. I'm here to bring you my top 50 albums of 2022. If you know anything about my channel, you know that I focus on metal, rock, and progressive rock. Progressive metal are kind of my focus areas, but I like all sorts of different kinds of metal and rock, and I dabble in some other genres too. So thanks to everyone who's watched, liked, commented on my videos this year, and especially to those who subscribed as well. And if you see the image here on this slide, you can see some of the album artwork to give you a preview of what some albums in my list are if you recognize the covers. But those aren't necessarily my top four. You have to watch until the end to find out. Or if you want to spoil the surprise for yourself, I also made a Spotify playlist with a preview song from each album in my top 50, except for one album that's not on Spotify. And you could see that playlist link in the description. I listened to 312 new albums across 40 subgenres of metal, rock, prog, punk, ambient, electronic, jazz fusion, pop, folk. I even tried a couple rap albums, but that's not really my scene, so they never really work for me. You won't see any rap in my top 50 of the year. So my top 50 is actually the best one out of every six albums I've heard. So it's pretty hard to get into my top 50. But my numbers 31 to 50, they're all very close in quality. Nothing much really separates them. I also feel like my number 51 to 100 albums in my ranking, they're not going to be in this video, but they're all pretty close to making my top 50 as well. Only a hair separates them in quality. So how about this? I'll post a video on my number 51 to 100 if this video gets more than like, let's say 120 views in the first week after release. Then I will know that maybe there's enough interest to make it worth my time. Or maybe if it gets like 10 likes or 10 comments in the first week as well. Probably won't make an epic slideshow like this because that was a lot more work than I usually put into a video. I'm also planning on making a top 10 albums video for various subgenres. Like I'll make one for prog metal, top 10 prog metal albums of the year. Um, I'll make one for prog slash psych rock, and then metalcore slash deathcore slash mathcore. Thinking of making one for punk, which would include hardcore punk and post-hardcore. And then maybe just a general rock one, including hard rock, pop rock, funk rock, indie rock, alternative rock, folk rock. I'll probably make a black metal one as well, even though I'm not the biggest black metal expert or fan. And even I'll probably make a death metal one with a heavy focus on technical death metal and melodic death metal, because those are the styles of death metal that I like. I don't enjoy as much of the death metal stuff unless it has some melodic aspect or some impressive technicality. I might come up with a few more top 10 lists to make as well. So check out the picture here on the screen with the stats to see what subgenres I listen to the most new albums in this year. All right, let's just jump right into my top 50 now. That's enough of a preamble here. Starting off with number 50 is Elder with Innate Passage. This is their seventh album. It's kind of psychedelic, progressive stoner rock with some doom metal influences. If you want a song to check out on here, I recommend The Purpose. It's yeah, I think it's their seventh album. It's kind of tricky to count because they have some splits and EPs, and they have a collaborative album with a band called Cadaver. So I'm not sure if that counts. But this band sounds like if Mastodon, Baroness, and Intronaut met up with Catatonia and Incubus. It's really great stuff. It sounds a bit like post metal, like Cult of Luna to me, but it's slow, relaxing, and it's not really like Cult of Luna because there's no aggressive, harsh vocals. It's kind of more ambient though, and kind of has that post rock, post metal influence. That's why I kind of mentioned that atmospheric posty stuff of Cult of Luna, but no screaming vocals. The vocals sound like Intronaut's clean vocals a lot to me. They're not really the best part of the band. It's more about the vibe and the instrumentals that you can really get lost in. In general, on my list, I focus more on music than on lyrics. So you won't hear too much lyrical analysis. I might briefly touch on them, but it's really more about the sound, the composition, yeah, composition, the performances, the production, the sound, that kind of the vibe, the style. And this is pretty cool. So I recommend it. What's next? Next, we have White Ward with False Light at number 49. And this is experimental post black metal. It's their third album. And if you want a song to check out, I recommend Cronus. These aren't necessarily my favorite songs that I'm putting here as preview songs, but they're kind of like representative of the album. I didn't want to put like the longest songs either, so I tried to keep the preview songs like under, some long prog albums on this. They might be like 15-minute songs, but I didn't want to put the like 20-minute epics as the preview song. I wanted to pick something that you get a feel for it, and I think Cronus is a good one for that. And this is my favorite black metal album of the year. I'm not really big into black metal, but I'm learning about it and I'm learning which various types of black metal I like. I'm becoming a fan of the more progressive black metal, experimental black metal, or atmospheric black metal, post black metal, and sometimes symphonic and melodic black metal. I can't really get into the raw, brutal stuff with production that sounds like it's done on a tape recorder in a cave as much. But this album is so beautiful and atmospheric, but it's also crushingly heavy and brutal. There's some smooth jazzy sections with saxophone, and then they're followed by blast beats and black metal shrieks. So it's very adventurous and fun. I recommend it. Next up, we have at number 48, Snarky Puppy with Empire Central. This is their 16th album, and it's jazz fusion, a little bit different from what I usually talk about. It's instrumental and it's really funky and fun. Has a lot of cool solos from different people on different instruments. And if you want a song to check out, I recommend Bet. And these preview songs are all in that Spotify playlist I mentioned in the description. At number 47, I have Pup with The Unraveling of Pup the Band. It's their fourth album. This is punk rock with some pop and post-hardcore influences. For a song to check out Totally Fine. That'll give you a vibe of the album. I think this is an album that even prog fans could potentially like because they do time signature changes and stuff, and it flows kind of like a concept album. It seems like it might be a concept album about the band falling apart and breaking up. I hope that's not the case, and I hope they keep going strong. But like I said, I'm not a lyrical analysis expert on this channel, so I focus more on the sound, and it sounds really cool. It's kind of like technical progressive punk rock, but it's still kind of pop punk, still kind of emo, post-hardcore. It's pretty cool. And number 46, I have Cancer Bats with Psychic Jailbreak. It's their seventh album. I think it's their best album yet. They're always a really fun band. I love the guitar riffs, love the vocal energy. This is hardcore punk with some sludge metal and metalcore influences. If you want a song to check out, I recommend Psychic Jailbreak, the title track. I love that they brought in time signature changes on this album and that song. I'm always a sucker for that. I love time signature changes. That's why I'm one of the reasons why I love Prog so much. And if you're a fan of bands like Every Time I Die and Norma Jean, this kind of has some of that energy to it. So I recommend checking this out. Number 45, I have Voivod with Synchro Anarchy. It's their 15th album. It's progressive thrash metal with alternative and avant-garde influences. For a song to check out Paranormalium. This is very quirky, progressive thrash metal. Like imagine mixing King Crimson and Primus with thrash metal albums. But kind of more of the fun, quirky thrash metal rather than the serious, like aggressive macho ones. So it's not as much like Slayer or Metallica, and it's more like the thrash metal albums that I've heard from bands that don't typically do thrash metal. So like Mr. Bungle's thrash metal album, Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny, and King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album, Infest the Rat's Nest, which are some of my favorite thrash metal albums because they are kind of, they don't take themselves too seriously. They're really fun and they just have this great energy. This is kind of like that, but quirkier. It's mixing like King Crimson and Primus in there to get that prog and that, I don't know, like almost funky, but like dissonant and weird sounds. I haven't yet finished listening to their whole discography, but I'm working on it and I love what this band does. It's just a really great band. Number 44, I have Evergrey with a Heartless Portrait, the Orphean Testament. It's their 13th album. It's progressive power metal. And for a song to check out Save Us. It's maybe not quite as good as their 12th album, but it's pretty close. I just don't find it's as progressive as their last one. But the vocal melodies and the hooks here are just so catchy. The guitar solos are great as well. They don't do harsh vocals. So check this out if you're a fan of like those progressive metal bands that don't go too brutal. So bands like Dream Theater, Symphony X, Ayreon, and Stradivarius would be similar to this. Number 43, I have Banco del Mutuo Soccorso, which is the only Italian band, an Italian album on this list. The album's called Orlando Le Forme dell'Amore. I think I said that somewhat correctly, but I don't speak Italian, so I don't know. This is their 15th album. It's progressive rock. They're a legendary Italian progressive rock band, like one of the biggest Italian progressive rock bands. I don't know too much about that scene though, but they're one of the original Italian prog rock bands from the 70s, and they're still going strong. For a preview song here, check out that Pianura Rosa, which I think means the red plain in English, if you translate it. Yeah, so they've been around for 50 years, but I have to be honest that this is the first album of theirs that I listened to. But I started going back and listening to more of I listened to their classic 70s albums, and it's great. All their stuff that I've listened to so far is great. I've heard that they take a dip in the 80s, and I haven't really taken a dive into those yet. Like a lot of prog rock bands, they went pop in the 80s. I'm curious about that. I'm probably going to check that out. But their stuff from the 70s is great. And I feel like this is like right up there with that stuff. So if anybody only knows their 70s stuff, I recommend you check this out. If you kind of stopped following them when they went pop in the 80s, they're back to their prog sound. This is awesome. Yeah, the only other Italian prog rock band I remember listening to so far is PFM, Premiata Forniera Marconi, but I'm hoping to get more into Italian prog rock. I think this album's even better than the PFM stuff I've heard, which was also solid. It's kind of like King Crimson, Gentle Giant, and Yes, but if they drew influences from more traditional Italian music rather than British. And of course, the lyrics are in Italian, so I can't understand them, but the music here is just amazing. Number 42, I've got Big Big Train, The Welcome to the Planet. It's their 14th album. Their first to be released after the tragic passing of their lead vocalist and multi-instrumentalist David Longdon following a car accident. Rest in peace, David. For a preview song here, check out the Connection Plan. It's really great. And all the music on this album is great. It's much softer and more relaxing than most other albums on my list. Like it's not metal or heavy at all. And you'll see some other albums on my list are fairly heavy, intense metal stuff, but I also have some softer progressive rock on here. This is really well written and performed prog rock music. It's inspired by that classic 70s period, but with some new and modern sounds thrown in as well. The Connection Plan just has a great violin riff to start the song. It makes a nice polyrhythm with the bass that's doing a 5 beat per bar feel, while the violins are in 4/4. Just great vocal harmonies on this album as well. Solid stuff. I recommend checking it out if you haven't heard it. Number 41, I've got Monuments with In Stasis. This is progressive metalcore, kind of genty. For a preview song here, check out Cardinal Red. It's their 4th album. Could be their best album yet, honestly. They are a solid progressive metalcore or gent band. My only criticism of them would be that I find they don't stand out enough from the other bands in that scene. If they can find more of their own identity, they could become one of the best bands in that scene. I do love the vocals on this album. It's the same guy who did the vocals on the Termina album called Dysphoria that I liked a lot in 2021. So great job. I think he's a new vocalist in this band. He wasn't the original, but he did a great job here. So I think they sound even better with him. And the vocals were good before, but they're just next level now. Number 40, I've got Star One and Revel in Time. This is their third album, and they're a progressive metal band, but it's kind of like a rock opera as well. It has a lot of symphonic influences. For a preview song, check out Prescient. Each song on this album is honoring a movie about time travel. I'm not sure what all the movies are, but I think there's Terminator, Back to the Future, and even Groundhog Day on here. I feel this is the best album from the Star One project. It's not quite as good as the best work from Arion, which is the other project by Arjen Lucassen, who is the band leader and composer for both Arion and Star One. He always brings in amazing guest vocalists. The opening track, Fate of Man, has Brittany Slays from Unleash the Archer, and she's just delivers amazing vocals there. Russell Allen from Symphony X is on here. Michael Mills from Toehider is amazing. One of the greatest vocalists, I think. Ross Jennings from Haken is on here. I love Haken, love Symphony X, love Toehider. So I love hearing these great vocalists coming together on this. If you're a fan of symphonic metal and power metal with hints of prog, so bands like Symphony X, and like that rock opera vibe, you'll probably like this. He also released alternate versions for each song with different singers, and I believe those are kind of the guide versions that the vocalists used to learn the songs, and then he brought in the real vocalists. Those are pretty cool to hear too. It's nice to hear like different versions of the same songs and kind of how they started out. Number 39, I've got Soilwork with Overgivenheten. I don't know how to say that word. They're a Swedish band. It's their 12th album. Of course, they're kind of like a melodic death metal album, but they brought in a lot more progressive influences. They're also really catchy. Like, it's not super brutal. There is death metal on here, but it's very catchy. Like, some of these songs are pretty radio friendly and groovy rather than just like nasty, dirty death metal. For a previous song here, check out Overgivenheten. Just lots of catchy melodies and choruses on this album. Great singing, solid screams. Like I said, it goes beyond the typical melodic death territory. I think some parts are catchy enough to be radio rock, but then there's other parts that are progressive and experimental. There's instruments on here that you wouldn't expect, like violins, saxophones on some of the songs. Not 100% sure if those are real or synthesized with some type of keyboard. A lot of them sound pretty real to me. I'd say this band is kind of like In Flames meets Dream Theater. The title track opens up the album and is so catchy. Unfortunately, we lost David Anderson this year, and he was the guitarist of Soilwork. He died at the age of 47. Rest in peace, David. Number 38, we've got Astronoid with Radiant Bloom. It's their third album. This is post-metal with black metal influences, shoegaze, and progressive influences. If you want a song to check out Eyes. It's just beautiful atmospheric music with clean, dreamy, high-pitched vocals over the fast drums and guitar. It occasionally ventures into black metal sounding territory, but also has moments with lots of effects, ambient sounds, and those shoegaze elements. If you're a fan of bands like Death Heaven, Sylvain, and Harakiri for the Sky, you'll probably like this. Number 37, I've got Meshuggah with Immutable. It's their 9th album. They're that avant-garde, extreme, progressive groove metal band, the pioneers of the djent sound. For a previous song, check out the opening track, Broken Cog. You know what you're getting into when you listen to Meshuggah. You know it's going to have low guitars with djenty chugging, crazy polymeter and polyrhythms. You can usually bob your head to the 4/4 beat in almost all their songs because they're almost all in 4/4, but they have the craziest syncopated accents, some of the most complicated rhythms you'll hear in music. My favorite tracks are the first two, and in particular, Broken Cog. I just love how it builds up. It starts with just this rhythm and then it dances around it, and it has great whispering vocals as well near the beginning. And by the end of the song, it's just really heavy. Check this out if you like the sound of that. Number 36, I've got Cult of Luna, The Long Road North. It's their ninth album. This is post-metal with progressive, sludge, and doom metal influences. Check out the preview song, Cold Burn, that I recommend here. And they play metal music. It's usually pretty slow paced, though, and trance-inducing. It's not fast, quick, technical metal, but it's still crushingly heavy, and it just has a great atmosphere. This is probably my third favorite albums of theirs. I like the last two a little better. I love Dawn to Fear, and I really love my favorite work of theirs, which is Mariner with Julie Christmas. It's a collaborative album, and they brought in Julie Christmas, a female vocalist, to add some cool atmosphere to what they do. And I just thought that was amazing. But I like all their three most recent albums. I really like all their albums, to be honest, but their most recent three are great for me. I like how they incorporate some clean vocals now in those three, as opposed to their old ones, which are all harsh vocals. They have some guest vocalists on this album too, done by Miriam Wallington on the third track, the one called Beyond I. And just hearing female vocals with this band gives a nice haunting feel to the song. Most of the songs that they do are with their vocalist is a male vocalist, so it's nice to get that variety throughout the album. Number 35, I have Billy Talent with Crisis of Faith. This is punk rock with some alternative rock influences, as well as post-hardcore and really pop, like radio accessibility influences here too. They have a track on here that features the vocalist from Weezer, which is honestly probably my least favorite track. I kind of like when they do their own vocals because they have this great vocal sound, amazing vocal harmonies with their three band members that sing. They just have such a great sound singing together. My favorite track on here, one that I recommend you checking out, is Forgiveness 1 and 2. And they've just been consistently putting out quality material since their first album. This is no exception. I also like how it's a short album. It's just over 36 minutes, but there's still a lot of variety. Forgiveness 1 and 2 is, I believe it's what you could call their first progressive rock song. There's many songs on here as well, though, with a more typical punk rock sound with just killer guitar lines, catchy poppy vocal hooks, and harmonies. Then they have also some songs like they have Judged on here that borders on hardcore punk territory. So you get some good variety here, ranging from prog rock, hardcore punk, and all the way to like pop punk almost. Number 34, I've got Red Handed Denial with I'd Rather Be Asleep. This is their third album. It's progressive metalcore, very gent sounding. It's got some post-hardcore kind of emo and pop influences as well. For a preview song, check out Cloud 9. They're just such a great Canadian band. Great vocals on here from Lauren Babick. As usual, she can sing so beautifully and powerfully, and she can also scream like a beast. The musicianship of the instrumentalists on this band is top-notch as well. If you're a fan of bands like Periphery, Protest the Hero, Tesseract, and you want to hear this, what it would sound like if those bands kind of met up with like Paramore, because they've got those like poppy hooks with the like female vocals too. This is your band. Let's see what other songs on here. Another good song here would be Let the Colors Fade to Gray. It's a great, powerful ballad. If you want a second song to check out after Cloud 9. At number 33, I've got another kind of metalcore one here with Under Oath and Voyeurist. It's their ninth album. Metalcore with some post-hardcore, post-metal, and alternative rock influences. Check out my favorite song on the album, Pneumonia. This is a solid return to form for Under Oath after their last album, Erase Me, which to me was a big dip in quality. I didn't really like Erase Me that much, but I really like Voyeurist. It's also got some good variety. Starts with nice and really hardcore heavy opener called Damn Excuses. And then it has some tracks with some really catchy pop inspired hooks. They have some tracks with a more classic metalcore sound with a little bit of that post hardcore and emo vibe from time to time. But Pneumonia is my favorite. It's the last track and it's almost like post metal. It's kind of very atmospheric and ambient. Really fun ride this album is. So check it out. Number 32, I've got King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with Changes. And spoiler alert, you might see them again on this list because they've released 5 albums this year. What an impressive, busy year for them. They've matched their 2017 output. 2017 is still my favorite year for them. I love the 5 albums that they released that year. They're just one of the most prolific bands here. This is their 23rd album, and they haven't even been going for that long. Slightly over a decade now, I think. I don't exactly remember what year they started. This is psychedelic rock, and this was their 5th album released this year. It's a bit jazzy, a bit psychedelic, a bit proggy, a bit poppy, a little bit dancey, a bit R&B. So a very different sounding. There's not too many bands that sound like this. I noticed the first letter of every track spells out the name Changes, so they do kind of nerdy stuff like that. If you're a fan of those types of Easter eggs, like kind of you want to nerd out about music, this is a good band for you. If you like nerding out about Tool, even though they don't sound anything like the band Tool, it's kind of attracting those types of nerd out types. I'm into that. I don't get too deep into the whole like reading about the Gizverse theories and stuff like that, but I really like their music. I saw them live this year. They were great. This album starts with a 13-minute track, Change, which to me is the standout track. So I recommend checking that out if you want to get a feel for this album. Number 31, I've got them again. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava. It's their 21st album. This one's more on the jazz fusion side, but it's still got that psychedelic vibe. It's got rock, funk, and soul influences. Check out the song Iron Lung if you want a preview of this. For this one, the first letter of each word in the album title lines up with the first letter in the 7 modes of the major scale. So Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. I think each song is in a different mode. I haven't fully mapped out which songs are in which mode. I didn't listen close enough to confirm that. And when this came out, I really had no idea what genre to expect. You never know with King Gizzard. Ice 5 was the song that they led with, and it's a jazzy, funky, dancey song. But with King Gizzard, you could really have anything ranging from pop to rap to metal to psychedelic to electronic to prog. Yeah, this is just great, but there are maybe 2 more King Gizzard albums that I'm going to have on this list. I didn't put all 5, but I put 4 out of 5 of their albums in my top 50. And here's the next one that you're going to see right away. Don't worry, I didn't put all 4 of them in a row. I just put 3 of them in a row. They're my favorite album of theirs from this year will be up higher in my list. But at number 30, I've got them again with Laminated Denim. Their 22nd album is psychedelic rock again with some progressive influences. Check out the song Hypertension for a preview. The album name here is an anagram of another album they released earlier this year called Made in Timeland. So if you want to be a nerd about that, go check that out. That's a fun fact for you. This album, or Made in Timeland, was actually more electronic. And spoiler alert, that's their album from this year that didn't make my list. I'm not super big into electronic stuff, so it's not on here, but it was still pretty cool. I liked it. It's just not good enough to make my top 50. But this one's similar to Made in Timeland in that it's just 2 15-minute tracks. The tracks play along to a ticking clock and metronome sound, just like on Made in Timeland. However, Made in Timeland is more electronic, and this one's more their typical psychedelic progressive rock sound. That's why I like it better than Made in Timeland. And I like it even better than the last two of theirs that I mentioned, the Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava one, and Changes. Um, but I guess that rules out what my favorite release of them from them is this year, which is Omnium Gatherum, and you'll see that later in my list. At number 29, I've got Devin Townsend with Lightwork. This is his 21st album by my count, but it's pretty hard discography to count again because he used a half dozen different band names like Devin Townsend Band, Devin Townsend Project, Devin Townsend. I think he used even like Punky Brewster and Ocean Machine on a couple of releases. I'm not counting the Casualties of Cool and Strapping Young Lad releases in that 21 because I actually consider those separate bands and not just him. But like for those other groups like Devin Townsend Project, Devin Townsend Band, Devin Townsend, he's kind of the main guy. So it's all kind of one discography to me. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year. I was really anticipating this along with the releases from He Is Legend and King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Devin Townsend's just one of the best singers in the rock and metal world today. I love how he's such a shapeshifter when it comes to styles. This album is very different sounding from what he typically does. It's not even that metal and it's not that progressive either, but it's still artsy. It's kind of art rock. There's some metal on here, but there's also some poppier stuff. There's some symphonic stuff. There is a little bit of prog on here too. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but it's one of his most accessible albums. It's just catchier, poppier, less heavy. Still with a couple heavy moments though, but more straightforward rock. Whereas in the past, he's done everything from extreme metal to prog rock to ambient meditation music to country. The standout tracks for me were Lightworker and Celestial Signals, the latter, which was released on disc 2 of Transcendence back in 2016. Now, the album proper here contains 10 tracks, but there's also a deluxe edition with a bonus disc called Nightwork, which contains 10 more original songs. So check that out if you like this. Number 28, I've got Obsidious with Iconic. This is their first album, a really strong debut. I think this might be my favorite debut album of the year. One of the few debut albums that actually makes my top 50. They're kind of a technical progressive death metal band. For a preview song, check out the title track, Iconic. They just made some really cool technical music here, great vocals with some clean singing, but some screams as well. If you're a fan of bands like Ne Obliviscaris, The Faceless, and An Abstract Illusion, you'll like this. Number 27, I've got Polyphia with Remember That You Will Die. It's their fourth album, kind of prog rock, but with a lot of different influences ranging from rock, electronic, hip hop, pop, metal, and jazz. Check out the song Playing God, just amazing, clean and fast guitar playing here. They're a mostly instrumental progressive rock band, but this album features a lot of guest vocalists. They brought in lots of influences from modern music, like I said, electronic, hip hop, as well as some math rock, I think. Playing God just has so much insane playing, but all the guest vocalists on here on other songs, they all sound so different, which is what makes this fun. They have Sophia Black on one of their songs, and she has the sound of a female pop star. And in her song with Polyphia, she's singing over like some progressive metal style shred guitar with hip hop beats and jazzy vibes all in one. Many of the other songs with hip hop vibes remind me of the album Homie by Chan, which I really love. And if you're a fan of that, you'll like this. And this song Bloodbath features Chino Marino from Deftones and has some of the heaviest metal guitars on this album. But Chino's vocals and melodies are just so beautiful. The last song on the album, Ego Death, features the guitar virtuoso Steve Vai and just has really cool guitar playing as well. Check this out if you're a guitar nerd or if you kind of like the sound of this genre blend and genre mashup that they're doing here. Number 26, I've got Greyhaven with This Bright and Beautiful World. This is post-hardcore, I guess. They're very hard to classify into a genre. It's got a lot of metalcore, hardcore punk, mathcore influences thrown in there, and also some prog metal. I couldn't even really decide which of those genres was kind of their main sound. They might be a metalcore band, they might be a mathcore or prog metal or hardcore punk, but I just went with post-hardcore as kind of the main thing because they do have a bit of that post-hardcore, some emo vibes in there too. Uh, yeah, it's their third album, just really solid album. Lots of cool tempo changes on here, which I like to hear. You don't hear that too much anymore with everybody playing to a click track, but they change up their tempos. They also have nice, catchy, clean vocal hooks, solid screams on here, cool breakdowns with those dissonant panic chords. If you're a fan of bands like Every Time I Die, Dillinger Escape Plan, Norma Jean, you'll like this. But this is also for fans of bands like Dead and Divine and Let Live. It's kind of more on that post-hardcore side, but also fans of people who like impressive guitar work and bands like Protest the Hero, Dance Gavin Dance, Hail the Sun, Chiodos. Um, those last three kind of being that those post-hardcore bands with the some crazy guitar stuff going on. You'll like this band for sure. We're at the halfway point, so everybody take a sip of water. We'll keep going. Oh my God, this video is going to be like an hour. I'll try to go a bit faster. All right, let's go. Number 25 is Perius with The Signal Heard Throughout Space. It's their third album. It's progressive metal slash rock with some melodic death metal influences. Check out The Signal for a preview song. Just really solid. It's the first album of theirs that I heard, but then I went back to check out their older work. It's all great. This album of theirs has their most clean singing throughout their career, but there are some screams. However, their older albums are mostly screams. They have some clean vocals. This one leans the other way. It's more clean vocals. Um, their older albums have more of a melodic death metal sound if you're a fan of bands like In Flames and Soilwork, but this one leads more into the progressive style. So if you're a fan of bands like Between the Buried and Me and Native Construct, you'll like this one. Number 24 is David Maxim Micic with Bilo or Bilo 4. I still haven't learned how to pronounce that. This is his fifth album. It's mostly instrumental progressive metal album. It's got some of that djent influence, some ambient, some electronic influences in there, but there are some tracks that feature guest vocalists. I think it's like the first half of the album is instrumental and the second half has vocals, if I remember correctly. Mostly the vocals are mostly done by the amazing Alexandra Djelmas, who's a part of David's band Sordid Pink, which was previously called Destiny Potato. There's a little bit of djent guitar playing on here, but there's a lot of ambient stuff and really beautiful, peaceful, and serene sounds. Some parts sound like they have some Asian music influence, and I was surprised at how amazing this was when I listened to it. It's just amazing. The first half instrumental, the second half has vocals, like I said. And I know and I love his work with his band Sordid Pink and Destiny Potato, but I really never got into his solo albums until this one. But as soon as I heard this, I went back and listened to Bilo or Bilo 3, 2, and 1, and his album Who Bit the Moon. They're all great, but I honestly think this is his best solo album yet. Number 23, I've got Ryo Okamoto with The Myth of the Mostrophist. This is his fifth album. If you don't count a soundtrack he did, it might be his sixth if you do count that. He's the keyboardist from Spock's Beard. If you're a fan of bands like Transatlantic, Patter Seeking Animals, the Neil Morse Band, Spock's Beard, you'll like this. This is awesome, epic prog compositions with great guest musicians as well, such as Steve Hackett, Mike Keneally, Nick DiVirgilio, and more. And just wonderful playing from all of them. Check it out. Number 22, I've got Ibaraki with Rashomon. This is progressive melodic black metal. It was kind of marketed as a black metal album, but it's really not that black metal. It's kind of more prog metal with some black metal, some death metal, some metalcore influences in here. This is maybe my favorite debut album of the year because it's kind of the first album from this project, but it's made by Trivium's Matt Heafy. So he's like he's made a lot of other albums with his band. So it's a debut, but kind of not like a debut. And it was weirdly marketed as black metal. I think it's more prog metal. But he has some great people helping him on this album as well, like Isan from Emperor, so that gives him some black metal cred. And Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance, who shockingly delivers some amazing black metal shrieks on the song Ronin, which I recommend as the preview song to check out. You would not expect that Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance could do amazing black metal shrieks, but I assure you he can. From the song titles on here, it looks like this album has a bit of a Japanese concept or theme, but I didn't fully follow if it's a concept album, but it's pretty cool, so I recommend it. Check it out if you like the sound of that. Number 21, I've got Ben Craven with Monsters from the Id. This is his fifth album. It's progressive rock. Check out the song Die Before You Wake. He's from Australia, and he's just an amazing progressive rock artist. This is an amazing album for fans of Porcupine Tree, Yes, and Emerson Lake and Palmer. Kind of like a mix of those bands, if you can imagine that. It's very symphonic progressive rock. Just this album just has 2 tracks, and they're both over 19-minute side-long epics. So each side of the vinyl is just filled with 1 track. But then he also has single edit versions that condense the tracks into 4 shorter singles, which are all great as well. Number 20, I've got Jonas Lindberg and the Other Side with his album Miles from Nowhere. This is their second album, and it's progressive rock. And check out the song Oceans of Time. This is just really solid and catchy progressive rock. It was hard to pick a favorite song on here. I like how there's many different vocalists on this album. There's male and female vocals. I hear lots of use of the Lydian mode as well, if you're for people who like music theory, which makes it sound very bright but adventurous, dreamy, floating, and mysterious to me. Number 19, I've got Charlie Griffiths with Tiktaalica, his debut album. Oh my god, I keep thinking I'm at my favorite debut album, and then another one comes up. But I almost don't count this as a debut because he's a veteran from the band Haken. But yeah, this might be the best debut album of the year. Check out the song Arctic Cemetery, which features vocals from Tommy from Between the Berry and Me. This album also has some other guest vocalists. It has a guest keyboard solo from Jordan Rudess. If you're a fan of Between the Berry and Me, Haken, Dream Theater, Devin Townsend, Metallica, this kind of sounds like those bands all combined. So check this out. Number 18, I've got Riverwood with Shadows and Flames. This is their second album. They're an Egyptian band. It's progressive Middle Eastern folk metal. Check out the song Dying Light. This is the first time I heard this band, but I went back and listened to their first album as well. It's great too. So if you're a fan of Orphan Land, like I am, you'll probably like this a lot because it's got a similar sound to that to me. Number 17, we've got Dance Gavin Dance with Jackpot Juicer, their 10th album. This is post-hardcore with some progressive and math rock influences. Check out the song Cream of the Crop. If you're a fan of bands like Idola, Hail the Sun, and Seder, this also has a bit of Protest the Hero vibes. They've got that high-pitch emo sounding clean vocals, but they've got those hardcore screams sprinkled in. Very busy lead guitars that almost never take a break. They're just constantly going at all out, fast pace. Really cool fast drum parts on here. Number 16, I've got Flummox with Reflummoxed. It's their 4th album. They're kind of avant-garde, progressive stoner metal. Check out the song Flummoxing Act 1, Garbanzo's Leap. This is very wacky musical journey. If you're a fan of bands like Others by No One, Mr. Bungle, and Primus, it kind of has that wackiness to it. I think there's a band member in common between this band and Others by No One, so that could be part of it. This is the first album of theirs I heard, but I went back and listened to everything they've done, and let me tell you, they are just great. Some of the bass playing on here reminds me of Les Claypool from Primus, which is awesome because he's one of my favorite bassists ever. Number 15, I've got Lalu with Paint the Sky. This is great progressive metal. It's their 3rd album. Check out the song The Chosen, which features Jordan Rudess and Simone Mularoni. I was drawn in by the amazing list of guest musicians that they featured on this album, which of course include Jordan Rudess of Dream Theater, Steve Walsh, formerly of Kansas, and even more. They kept me engaged here with just well-executed prog metal. If you're a fan of bands like Arion and Dream Theater, you'll like this. Number 14, I've got Michael Romeo with War of the Worlds Part 2. This is progressive metal with power metal, symphonic metal, and neoclassical metal influences. His third solo album. He's, of course, the amazing guitar player from Symphony X. Check out the song Divide and Conquer if you like the sounds of this. If you liked War of the Worlds Part 1, I'm sure you'll like this. It's a different vocalist, though, but the vocalist here is also pretty great. It sounds like Symphony X music to me. Even the vocals are kind of reminiscent of Russell Allen, of Symphony X. So maybe Michael Romeo wrote some of this with Symphony X in mind. I'm not sure, but it kind of sounds like that if you like that band. Number 13, I've got Allegiant with Damnum. This is their 6th album. It's technical melodic death metal with some progressive influences. Check out the song Into Embers. This album is a journey, guttural death growls, but they introduce more clean singing and melody than what they had before. It's hard for me to say if this is their best album. I really like their 2016 album, Proponent of Sentience. Yeah, Proponent of Sentience. But this rivals that one. Really great band, really great work. Number 12, we got Animals as Leaders with Parrhesia. This is instrumental progressive metal with that djent sound, of course. It's their 5th album. Just amazing instrumental music, like all their previous work. I think this is the best instrumental album of the year. I usually prefer stuff with vocals, but when you have Tosin Abasi shredding in your band, like, I'll be listening. Yes, we've arrived at King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizards Omnium Gatherum at number 11. So this is my favorite King Gizzard album this year. It's their 20th album. More of that psychedelic rock sound, but it's got progressive folk, metal, hip hop, electronic, and pop parts to it. It's very all over the place. Check out the song, The Dripping Tap, which is the opening song and the longest song on the album. It's probably the longest preview song that I picked. I just had to pick it as it's my favorite song on the album. This is just a mix of many of the styles they've done before. It's kind of a mixed bag. A lot of their albums have more of a cohesive sound throughout, but this one is not like that. It's all over the place. It changes throughout the album. Usually, like I said, they kind of pick a theme for their album. Like they have a spaghetti Western album where everything is spaghetti Western. They have their metal album, Infest the Rat's Nest, where everything's kind of thrash metal, stuff like that. So they kind of pick a sound and do an album. This one's just like, hey, what's everything we've done and a couple things that we haven't done, and let's do a mixed bag. So it's pretty cool to kind of hear their variety. The new style that they brought in was the hip hop tracks. So that was interesting to hear. I'm not usually a fan of that, but spread out throughout the album, it's pretty cool. I don't really want them to do a whole album of that. It's not really my favorite sound of theirs, but I think it's cool to throw in a couple of tracks from time to time that have that vibe. Number 10, I've got The Deer Hunter with Antime. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's their 8th album. This is progressive rock with that indie rock, pop, jazz, and symphonic influences. Check out the song Ring 5, Middle Class. This is just great. Everything they put out is top notch. It's a concept album that acts as an atlas of a fictional world, and it's their last remaining metropolis, and it explores its social hierarchy from the outside in, exploring 8 separate casts in this fictional city. The storyline here reminds me a bit of Divergent or Hunger Games series. I didn't dive into the lyrics too much, but it sounds pretty cool for nerd types. Check it out. All right. Number 9, Seder with Totem. Probably my favorite post-hardcore album of the year, I think. Hopefully there's not another one that pops up that proves me wrong. This is post-hardcore with that progressive metal, djent, and mathcore influences. Their 2nd album. Check out the song Attrition. Just really great post-hardcore. If you're a fan of bands like Protest the Hero, Idola, Capstan, you'll love this. Great guitar parts, lots of great singing vocals as well as screaming vocals here. Number 8, I've got Wilderun with Epigon. Their 4th album. This is symphonic progressive folk metal with death and black metal influences. Check out the song Passenger. This is possibly their best one yet, though it's hard to say because they've been really consistent in their album output. This sounds like if Opeth kept doing their growling vocals and then met up with Devin Townsend and added more folk influence. The first two songs on the album start out a bit softer and folky, but then it picks up and there are parts that are just really heavy on this album, getting into death metal, black metal, really extreme territory. Number 7, I've got Persephone. I think it's Persephone or not Persephone with Metanoia. It's their sixth album. This is progressive death metal. Check out the song Merkaba. This is just an epic journey of an album. Lots of ups and downs between fast, slow, soft, and harsh, and just really great playing. Number 6, I've got Rollo Tomasi with Where Myth Becomes Memory. This is mathcore with progressive rock, experimental, and post-hardcore influences. Check out the song Cloaked. This band has a female vocalist. She can sing really angelically. She can scream intensely. Both extremes are present here. Some parts sound almost like synth pop and indie rock, but some parts sound like that post rock and shoegaze sound. But then other parts are kind of the most spastic, frantic, chaotic, extreme mathcore sounds with screams like Dillinger Escape Plan level intensity. Really cool. Number 5, we got Porcupine Tree with Closure Continuation. This is progressive rock. It's their 11th album. Check out my favorite song on the album, Rat's Return. It's been 13 years since their last album. Really great to have them back. I love Steven Wilson's solo work, especially Raven, I Refuse to Sing, and Hand Cannot Erase. Wasn't as big on his last two albums as they went more pop direction, but I love that he's returned to this progressive rock sound and he made a Porcupine Tree album. I'll still follow his solo career as well as Porcupine Tree in the future. I love the bass lines on this album. Steven Wilson played them. He also plays the guitars and sings lead vocals. The drums by Gavin Harrison, the keyboards by Richard Barbieri are all amazing. There's soft acoustic moments on this album as well as some heavy metal riffs. Lots of odd time signature parts. Check it out if you're into that. Don't you hate it when you have to take a bunch of different pills to deal with your pain relief, weight loss, anxiety, depression, and erectile dysfunction? Now you can just take one pill for all those needs. Mikey's Magical Multi-Purpose Pills, solving all of your problems. They're chewable and they taste great. They come in strawberry, blueberry, or orange flavor. Mikey's Magical Multi-Purpose Pills. Use the discount code UNICORN for 30% off. All right, I had to do a quick cut there because I realized I forgot to show my hardware. I wanted to show the vinyl that I had for some of the entries in my top 5 here. Here's my Porcupine Tree Closure Continuation vinyl. Stoked to have this. Now my number 4 is He Is Legend with Endless Hallway. This is their 7th album. And the genre here is pretty hard to define. So I've called it hard rock. It's not clear if it's actually metal, but it kind of is. It has metal influences. It has hardcore, alternative, psychedelic, sludge, southern rock and metal, and progressive rock and metal influences all thrown into a blender. My favorite song on here would be The Prowler. And this was one of my most anticipated albums of the year as well. I love everything He Is Legend has released throughout their career. I think they're a highly underrated band that deserves to be more popular. Their sounds evolved quite a bit over their career. They began as more of a post-hardcore metalcore band, and then shifted to this hard rock mixed with heavy metal and some progressive and experimental and stoner rock things thrown in there, as well as alternative, psychedelic, sludge metal, and southern rock. They even do some djenty riffing on this, so you put all those sounds in the mixing pot. That's the new He Is Legend sound. I love how they do tempo and dynamic changes throughout the album. The vocals are great. They're mostly catchy and melodic singing with some rasp behind them, with the occasional intense scream. However, I think people who aren't into screaming vocals could like this album as they're used sparingly on here. The chugging guitars just have so much groove and they make me bang my head. They also have nice ambient leads and textures in their song. I think they're one of the most consistently solid bands And while I don't know if they've ever made a 10 out of 10 album, I think they cranked out 9 out of 10 albums in a row. And this is just great. The riffs, the melodies, the grooves, A plus. And number 3 is Bubble Math with Turf Ascension. This is their third album, and it's progressive rock. This is the one that you can't find on Spotify. You can find their first 2 albums on Spotify, but they haven't put this one up. You can listen to 2 of the tracks over at Bandcamp, and then you for free, and then you could purchase the other 2. There's 4 songs on this album, and they're all pretty long, given that it's a prog band. It's definitely worth hearing the whole thing. When I heard it, at the time I heard it, it was my favorite album of the year immediately. But 2 have since surpassed it. And when I heard this, I immediately listened to all 3 of their albums, and they're all great. Their sound is pretty unique and eclectic. If I had to compare it to anything, I'd say it's like Mr. Bungle meets Gentle Giant and King Crimson. There's only 4 songs on the album, like I said, but it's 50 minutes long. So each song is about 10 minutes. The opening song, Surface Tension, is 18 minutes long. My second favorite album I also got on vinyl. This is an Abstract Illusion with their album Whoa. And this is their second full-length album. It's kind of atmospheric, progressive death metal. There's some like black metal influences in there too. So maybe like atmospheric, progressive, blackened death metal. Check out the song Prosperity to get a feel for the album. That one starts with some cleaner vocals. They have clean vocals as well as screaming. This is for fans of Nea Obliviscaris, Persephone, Wilderun, Xanthocroid, and Opeth. I'd say it sounds most like Nea Obliviscaris to me. But surprisingly, as hard as this may be to believe, it might even be better than Nea Obliviscaris. I was blown away and just taken by surprise when I heard this. It's a really bleak and dark but beautiful and epic journey that I think anyone who's into kind of more extreme, adventurous, progressive metal should hear. And now we've made it to the grand finale here, my number 1 album of 2022, which is Toe Hider, and I have little to no memory of these memories, which I have here on CD. You see, I only have 3 of the albums on my top 50 list so far. I'm hoping maybe I'll get the Bubble Math one, He Is Legend. You know, I could probably buy like 5 albums a year and keep a reasonable budget. I'm not trying to buy everything on physical media. I do use Spotify. I know that's not a good music purist way to hear music, but I like to listen to a lot of different stuff, and I don't want to break bank. So it's kind of the most affordable way for me to do that. But anyway, I digress. This is Toe Hider's 5th album. It's progressive rock, but there's metal and pop influences on here. This whole album is really just one song that's 48 minutes long, but they did release like a single slice snippet called The Hoarder, which is a 3-minute and 13-second long preview snippet. That's part of that 48-minute epic. And that's kind of the single they released to promote the album before it came out. And that's what I put on my Spotify playlist because I didn't want to put the whole 48-minute epic, but you have to hear this whole thing in its entirety. This is just one 47-minute epic progressive rock track. It dabbles in so many styles. You got your pop, you've got, I almost said polka. I meant to say pop and folk. You don't have polka in here. You have pop, you have folk, you have metal, and even like a video game music sounding section. And I think this is the best thing that Toe Hider ever released. And that's saying a lot because everything Toe Hider does is great. The vocals by Michael Mills are fantastic. He also was on the Star One album, and I mentioned him earlier. Just an amazing singer. He can hit the real high notes. He does some cool vocal harmonies reminiscent of Queen. And I think of this whole song and this whole album as just like a rock opera. It kind of has that vibe. I also like that it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's kind of fun and silly. It's a fun and silly prog epic. And Michael Mills also plays the guitars on the track. He's kind of the one man behind Toe Hider. I think he brings in some friends and guest musicians and stuff. Although he may have played everything on this, I don't exactly know. Maybe it says quickly on the CD. Let's check. No, it doesn't say, but I wouldn't be surprised if he played everything. Maybe he programmed the drums. I'm not sure. He's just, not only is he a great singer, he plays a mean guitar and he's just a wicked composer. So this is something that every fan of kind of quirky, funny, silly, doesn't take itself too seriously, that kind of progressive rock, you have to hear this. And I hope you enjoyed my top 50 albums of 2022. Stay tuned for more because I'm going to be releasing top 10 videos for prog metal, prog rock, various other genres that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, black metal, death metal, other styles, probably punk rock. So stay tuned if you want to hear that. And I also weekly release. I've been doing a segment called What's New 2022, where I talk about new albums that came out that week and get my first impressions on them. So stay tuned for that. Hit the subscribe button if you want to stay in the loop on all the videos I'm posting. And definitely share your top 50s because I want to know if I missed any albums. I listened to a lot. Like I said, 312 albums this year, but it's still not everything. I know there's more out there, and I'd love to hear if people think that there's some great stuff in the genres that I focus on that I missed, or even in genres that I don't focus on. Like, go ahead and expand my horizons. So let me know what you think, and hope somebody watched this all the way through to the end and enjoyed it. Till next time, peace out.